I swore I'd never go back. Not to Merriman's Hollow, not to the chapel, and certainly not near the bell tower. Not after what happened when I was 12. The nightmares stopped in my 20s. The insomnia lasted longer. The medication. Well, let's just say I got good at pretending everything was fine. But grief is a tricky key. It opens doors you thought were bricked over. My father died in August of last year, and the old house was left to me. It was either go back and deal with it, or let it rot. I should have let it rot. You can't find it on your phone. If you search for it, you get a blank patch of woodland in upstate New York, no towns, no roads. Just a blur of trees and nothing. But it's there, nestled among forgotten fields and bramble-covered foundations. Merriman's Hollow is the kind of place that feels like it remembers things you don't. The house was still standing, though barely. Shingles curled like dead leaves, and vines had grown in through the cracks. It smelled of mildew and dust, like a grave disturbed. I should have turned around the moment I saw the silhouette of the chapel on the hill. But the bell wasn't there. Not yet. I remembered it from childhood, the tiny chapel built from weathered stone, sitting crookedly at the edge of the woods. Its tower was empty. It always had been. Just a square of darkness open to the sky. My father used to tell me the town never finished it, and that's why no one ever held services there. But that wasn't true. Old papers in the attic said it had been active until 1912, when all 32 parishioners vanished during a single autumn evening service. They never found bodies, just shoes, neatly lined in rows. No bell was ever recovered. No one remembered hearing one ring. But I do. I still do. The first night I stayed in the house, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen with a flashlight and a bottle of my father's rye, staring at the overgrown field behind the property. It was just before 6 p.m. when I heard it. Gong. It wasn't distant, it was close. Clear. Sonorous. Like an old church bell swinging hard with weight and purpose. I jumped up so fast, I spilled the bottle. My heart pounded. I ran to the back window and stared out toward the chapel. No movement, no figures, but I could have sworn I saw a light flickering in the chapel tower. I went outside with the flashlight. No footprints, no wind, and no bell. That night, I had a dream, or thought I did. In it, I was back in the chapel. Only now it was whole, freshly built, the stone clean and uncracked. The pews were filled with people facing forward, heads bowed. I walked the aisle. Each one had a blank face. Pale skin, no eyes, no mouths. Just smooth stretches of flesh where features should have been. Yet they hummed softly, tunelessly, like insects buzzing. At the pulpit stood a man in robes that hung like wet fabric. His face was also blank, but behind him was a bell. Massive, black, and swinging without touch. Each time it tolled, I felt my name slipping from me, syllable by syllable. I woke up gasping. My nose was bleeding, and I could still hear the echo of the bell in my ears. The next morning, I found something that wasn't mine. A small scrap of paper tucked under the front door. It read, "Don't let it ring a 7th time." No signature, no explanation. Later that day, I walked up to the chapel again, just to prove to myself there was no bell. I climbed the stairs to the tower, which were half-rotted and slick with moss. When I got to the top, I felt my stomach drop, because now there was a rope, old, frayed, dangling from the ceiling, swinging slightly, though the air was perfectly still. And on the wall, written in what looked like charcoal, "IT rings for you now." That evening, I didn't wait. At precisely 5:58 p.m., I sat outside with my phone recording, pointing it toward the woods. At 6 o'clock, the bell rang again. Gong. I recorded 5 rings before the phone shut itself off. But that wasn't the worst of it. When I played it back, the bell was there. But after the 3rd ring, another sound joined it. A whisper, too faint to make out at first. But after slowing the audio and playing it through headphones, I made out the words, "Come see what you left behind." In the attic, I found an old church ledger from 1912. One entry stood out, a list of names, handwritten, scratched in hurried ink. Myra Alton Henry Carlyle. Eleanor Bainbridge Tom Decker. My grandfather's name. My father never told me. And beside Tom's name, in different ink, thicker, almost gouged into the paper, were 3 words. Wrong. Not taken. Last night it rang again. Gong. But not just once. 6 times, each heavier than the last. The sound didn't end. It lingered, reverberated in my bones. The windows shook. The birds fled. The air went thick like breathing water. When I looked up at the bell tower from the porch, the bell was there. Large, black, and swinging. And there was someone pulling the rope. They were too tall, too thin. The head bowed forward, arms unnaturally long, stretching all the way down the length of the tower's interior. And though the figure didn't look my way, I could feel its gaze. I knew, in that moment, that the next ring would be the 7th, and it would be for me. I packed this morning, tried to drive. The car wouldn't start. The battery was new. No reason. I tried to walk out down the winding forest path back to the county road. But I kept coming back to the house. Every turn I made curved toward the chapel. And each time I passed it, the rope swayed a little more. It's dusk now. I'm sitting here, writing this on my father's old typewriter, because nothing digital will work. I can hear the rope creaking. I know what's coming. And if this page survives, if someone finds this, don't let it ring a 7th time. Because when it does, the chapel opens, and it remembers who didn't bow. It rang. At exactly 6 p.m., the bell let out its 7th toll. Gong. But it wasn't like the others. This time, it sounded like it came from inside the house. The walls groaned. The ceiling shook. Glass shattered in the kitchen. My ears bled, and I dropped to the floor clutching my head. The air felt alive, like it was watching me. The rope in the tower had been moving before. Now it was thrashing. I blacked out for a few seconds, or maybe longer. When I opened my eyes, it was dark, except for the flickering of the old oil lamp I'd lit earlier that evening. The flashlight was dead. My phone refused to power on. But the house wasn't empty anymore. I could feel it. Something had entered. It was quiet at first, just the subtle shift of weight in the hallway, like someone standing just around the corner. Then I heard my name, Thomas. It was whispered, but not in any voice I recognized. It sounded wet, hollow, broken, like someone trying to remember how to speak. I don't remember falling asleep. I must have passed out from exhaustion or fear or whatever energy had invaded the house after the 7th toll. But I woke in the living room at dawn. My neck ached from where I'd slumped over on the couch. One detail made my blood run cold. The armchair across from me, the one that had sat empty for over 30 years, had impressions in the cushion, like someone had been sitting there all night, watching me. The smell was stronger, too. Not mildew anymore. Something else. Something that reminded me of damp fabric left in the dark. Like wet wool. Like rot. And on the armrest, 3 long scratches, too deep for a fingernail. That day I went into town, if you can even call it that. A bait shop, a gas station, a diner. I asked the man at the counter in the gas station if he knew anything about the old chapel on the hill. He froze, didn't speak for almost 10 seconds. Then he said, "We don't talk about the bell." When I pressed him, he slid a folded envelope across the counter. "This came for you," he muttered. "3 days ago. But how would anyone?" He just shook his head. Inside the envelope was a piece of parchment. Not paper, parchment like animal skin. On it, written in ink that looked almost fresh, were the words, "We all come home eventually. You were promised." No signature, no return address, but the back bore a seal, black wax, a symbol pressed into it, an open mouth, surrounded by 6 smaller bells. That night, I didn't stay in the house. I brought my sleeping bag out to the shed. I figured it was safer, no windows, only one door, and far enough from the chapel to maybe avoid the sound. I was wrong. At 6 p.m., the bell rang again, 8 times, and with each ring, I saw them, in the trees. Children, pale, staring, silent. They weren't glowing or ghostly. They looked real, tangible, except for their mouths. Each child had a mouth that extended from cheek to cheek, a slit like a wound, sewn shut with what looked like twine or wire. And in their hands, each held a small brass bell. But none of them rang. They just stared, and then, slowly, one by one, they began to smile. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I searched the house again. Every drawer, every floorboard. Behind the fireplace, I found a loose brick. Inside was a tape recorder, one of those handheld ones from the 80s. My father's handwriting on the label read, "For when it starts again." I pressed play. My father's voice, shaking, "Tom, if you're hearing this, the bell's already rung. That means it's coming for you now." I tried to stop it, I really did. But you have to understand, I let out the first time, when I was your age. It took my brother, your uncle. He heard the whispers, too, and I just watched. I thought it wanted him. But no, it just waits. Until we're alone. Until we go back. There's no way to stop the ringing. Not once it starts. But there might be a way to keep it from finishing. 7 rings was the invitation. 8 is the claim. 9. If you hear 9, Tom, don't run. Don't hide. Kneel. That's the only thing it respects. Click. I did what I said I wouldn't. I went back to the chapel. The door was open this time. Inside, it looked the same as it had in my dreams. Rotted pews, splintered altar, blood-colored light filtering through the broken stained glass. But there was something new. A hole in the floor. Circular. Perfectly cut. Lined with brick that looked too clean for the rest of the structure. I leaned over the edge. It was too dark to see the bottom, but I swear I heard something breathing. Something wet. Something. Speaking. Not words. Not even sounds. Just movement. Language made of shift. Of hunger. The rope above was taut. No longer swaying. And the bell, now fully visible, was beginning to open. Split down the middle like a blooming flower. Inside it was a mouth. That night, everything changed. At 5:59, all the clocks stopped. Not froze. Stopped. Even my watch. Time became a still pool of air. And then, even without ticking over to 6, the bell rang. Gong. 9 times. Each ring cut through the world like a blade. Each one made the walls bend inward. The sky turned a deep, impossible shade of red. Trees began to lean in toward the house. The rope was no longer visible from the ground. Only the bell and the mouth. And then came the voice. Not whispered, not from the tower, but inside me. You knelt before your father's fear. Now kneel before mine. I didn't kneel. I ran. Through the woods. Toward the road. Toward anywhere but here. But the woods didn't end. No matter how far I went, the trees just kept circling back. Like the world had folded in on itself. The whispers grew louder. Closer. Until they weren't whispers anymore. They were names. Dozens of names. Hundreds. Some I recognized from the ledger. Some I didn't. And then I heard mine. Thomas Decker. It was said not as a threat, but as a welcome. I don't know how I got back to the house, or how I'm even writing this now, but I'm leaving these pages in the shed. If anyone finds them, anyone at all, don't let it ring again. Burn the rope. Bury the tower. And if you hear a whisper say your name, don't answer, not even your thoughts, because once it knows you know, you belong to it. After the ninth toll, the world didn't return to normal. The air remained thick, heavy with anticipation. The usual sounds of the forest, chirping birds, rustling leaves, were absent. An oppressive silence settled over Merriman's Hollow, as if the land itself was holding its breath. I tried to leave again, but the paths twisted unnaturally, leading me back to the chapel every time. The landscape had changed. Familiar landmarks were gone, replaced by unfamiliar trees and rocks. It was as if the hollow had become a labyrinth, designed to keep me trapped. On the third night, I ventured back to the chapel, hoping to find answers. Inside, the pews were once again filled with the faceless congregation from my dreams. They sat motionless, their featureless faces turned toward the pulpit. At the front stood the robed figure, its head bowed. As I approached, it slowly raised its head, revealing a smooth expanse of skin where a face should be. Yet I could feel its gaze piercing through me. "You have heard the call," it intoned, though no mouth moved. "You cannot unhear it." I stumbled back, fleeing the chapel as the congregation began to hum, a low, resonant sound that vibrated through my bones. Back at the house, I searched for anything that could shed light on these events. In the attic, I discovered an old dust-covered trunk. Inside was a leather-bound diary belonging to Eleanor Bainbridge, one of the names from the 1912 ledger. Her entries detailed the days leading up to the disappearance of the parishioners. The bell rings each evening at dusk, though no one dares to pull the rope. We hear it in our dreams, calling us to the chapel. Reverend Whitaker says it is a sign of salvation, but I feel only dread. Last night, I saw Thomas Decker standing outside the chapel, his eyes blank, his mouth moving silently. He is but a boy, yet he speaks in tongues I cannot comprehend. The final entry read, "We gather tonight as instructed. The bell will ring, and we shall answer. May God have mercy on our souls." Each day, I noticed changes in myself. My reflection in the mirror became distorted. My eyes appeared sunken, my skin pallid. I began to hear whispers even during the day, soft voices urging me to return to the chapel. I resisted as long as I could, but the pull was too strong. On the seventh night, I found myself standing before the bell tower once more. The rope hung still, yet the bell began to swing, emitting a deep, resonant toll. Gong. With each ring, I felt a part of myself slipping away, memories, emotions, identity. Gong. I fell to my knees, tears streaming down my face. Gong. Darkness enveloped me. I awoke in the chapel, lying on the cold stone floor. The congregation was gone, the pews empty. The bell rope hung motionless. But something was different. I felt hollow, as if a part of me had been extracted, leaving behind an empty shell. I returned to the house, hoping to find solace, but it no longer felt like home. The walls whispered. The floors creaked with unseen footsteps. I'm not alone. I write this now with trembling hands, unsure of how much longer I can resist the pull of the bell. If you find this account, heed my warning, do not enter Merriman's Hollow. Do not heed the bell's call, for once it rings, it claims you, and there is no escape. I stopped sleeping. Each time I closed my eyes, I would awaken in the chapel, never in bed. Always cold, always alone. The dreams were no longer dreams. I began losing track of days. Time inside Merriman's Hollow warped like heat rising off asphalt. The nights stretched longer, and dusk seemed to arrive earlier each day. One morning, I think it was morning, I heard dragging sounds in the attic again. I'd boarded the entrance weeks ago, but now the boards were torn open, as if something inside had broken out, not in. I ascended the narrow staircase, flashlight in hand, and found the remnants of old rope fraying on the floor. The end was charred. Above the spot where the rope lay, the ceiling beams bored deep gouges, like fingernails had clawed at the wood. In one corner, something new, a child's dress, aged and folded neatly beside a small, cracked bell. The tag inside read, E. Bainbridge. I drove to the nearest township that hadn't been swallowed by the woods, Rivervale, 25 miles south. I asked the librarian if there were records of Merriman's Hollow, anything on Reverend Whitaker, Eleanor Bainbridge, or the chapel. She hesitated before responding. There's no record of Merriman's Hollow. That land was condemned in 1924 after a mine collapse. No one's lived there since. But there's a chapel, I said, and a house. I've been living there. Her eyes darkened. That's impossible. The only structure reported standing after the collapse was the bell tower. She stopped herself. But it burned. The tower was struck by lightning in 1924. No one's been there since. I asked her what happened to the congregation. Gone, she whispered. All of them. They walked into the woods one dusk and never came back. That place was erased after. It's not on maps. It's not supposed to be found. When I returned to the house, the bell was tolling again, louder than ever. This time, it did not wait for dusk. It rang at noon, at midnight, in the dead silence before dawn, and each toll shook something in the foundation of the house. I found the pulpit in the chapel overturned. The congregation returned, now twitching violently in the pews. Each faceless figure jerked with every toll, and at the bell tower's base stood him, the bell ringer, no longer a robed figure. I saw what was beneath. A man-shaped thing, limbs elongated, with blackened skin like overfired clay. Its face was a gaping hole where the bell rope ran through, swinging freely inside its hollow skull. With every ring, the rope dragged something new from it. Hair teeth, nails, small things that once belonged to someone living. It gestured to me, beckoning. Come take your turn. I ran, but I heard my name again. Not shouted, whispered, from inside my own mouth. That night, I smashed every mirror in the house. They had turned against me. No longer reflections, they were windows. I saw the chapel behind me in the glass. Sometimes, I saw myself walking toward the pulpit when I wasn't moving. Other times, my reflection would linger, staring long after I turned away. One mirror had something carved into the frame that I hadn't noticed before. The bell chooses. The bell remembers. The bell returns. I read aloud before I realized what I'd done. The walls groaned. Then the floor gave out beneath me. I fell into blackness. I awoke beneath the chapel. There were catacombs down there, shallow graves packed into stone alcoves, each marked with dates spanning 1874 to 1923, names I recognized from Eleanor's diary. In the center of the chamber was a pit, and above the pit, dangling from a fraying rope, was the original bell, smaller than the towers, but older. The metal was cracked, oozing black sap. I felt compelled to ring it. As I reached for the rope, I heard them. Voices. Children. Mothers. Preachers. Sobbing, pleading, whispering. Don't ring it. It doesn't stop. One more ring, and we forget again. I pull my hand back. Too late. The bell rang on its own. I don't remember who I was. I have a journal with my name inside, but the name feels foreign. The house is different now. The air always smells of smoke and iron. The walls bleed sap from behind the wallpaper. I stopped trying to leave Merriman's Hollow. The roads always loop. Sometimes people come, hikers, campers, lost travelers. They never stay long, but I hear them at night, knocking at the chapel door. Soon they will hear the bell, too. This is not the end. I feel another toll building in my chest like a thunderstorm waiting to break. If you're reading this, do not search for Merriman's Hollow. Maps won't help you. Curiosity won't save you. The bell has a sound only the chosen can hear. And once you hear it, your name is added to the list. The bell ringing never forgets. I don't know how long it's been since I came to Merriman's Hollow. Days bleed into nights without distinction. I used to mark time by the sound of the bell at dusk, but now it tolls at its own whim. Once a day, twice, sometimes not at all. Other times it doesn't stop. The worst part is I've stopped reacting to it. Somehow, I've grown used to the sound. That's when I knew something was wrong. Something inside me had changed. I wasn't just hearing the bell anymore. I was beginning to understand it. It speaks in tones, not words, but I knew what it wanted. What it had always wanted. To be heard. To be obeyed. To be worshipped. I discovered them behind the chapel's altar. At first, I thought it was mold. But when I scraped away the damp plaster, I saw what was really beneath. Layers of names carved into the stone, hundreds of them. Some etched with shaking hands, others with deep, violent gouges. They climbed the wall like vines, names upon names, old and new. My name was there, already carved. So was Eleanor Bainbridge. So was the librarian from Rivervale. So was Thomas Decker, the boy from the diary. So was yours. Yes, yours. The stone was cold when I touched it. But the letters, they were warm, still fresh. It began after midnight. I woke to candlelight flickering under my door. The house smelled of old incense, heavy, suffocating. When I stepped into the hallway, I wasn't in the house anymore. I was back in the chapel, except it wasn't abandoned. It was alive. People filled the pews, hundreds of them, all facing forward, all faceless. Their skin pulsed like wax too close to a flame. At the pulpit stood Reverend Whitaker, alive, whole, eyes black as oil. You've been faithful, he said. You've stayed. He extended a hand, and I saw the rope. Not the one from the tower. This one was alive, woven of hair, sinew, and nerves. It pulsed, twitched, hummed. The bell wants your name spoken last, he said. Then the hollow will close for a while. I backed away, but hands rose from the pews, dozens of them, pressing me forward. The rope brushed my face. It felt like a tongue. They followed me home. That night, I bolted the doors, boarded the windows. burned salt, and whispered prayers I barely remembered from childhood. None of it worked. They came anyway, not through the door, through the walls. They stepped through plaster like mist, melting through wood and stone, whispering in languages not meant for human mouths. Their faces formed for moments. My father, my old teacher, a girl I once loved, then collapsed into nothing. They gathered around my bed. They stared without eyes. One leaned in and whispered, "You heard it. You called it." Another placed a hand on my chest. "It's your turn to ring." I've started to hear it, even when it doesn't ring. Not from the chapel, from inside. Sometimes when I breathe, I can hear it resonate behind my ribs. A deep metallic hum, as if my bones were tuning forks. The tone makes me dizzy. My teeth ache constantly. I found blood on my pillow this morning, not from my nose or mouth. From my ears. They're trying to hollow me out. Like the bell ringer. Like the others. I don't know what they're turning me into, but I know it has something to do with the final toll. On the final day, though it felt more like a century, dusk came early. The sun didn't set. It was swallowed. The sky turned black, not dark but pitch. The kind of black that drinks in light and breath. The forest froze mid-motion. Trees bent toward the chapel, leaning in like worshippers at a sermon. Then the bell rang. Not from the tower, not from below, but from inside me. I felt my spine snap backward with the force of it. My chest cracked like a door unhinging, and something cold and ancient crawled out of me. It had no face, no name. It rang the bell one last time. Gong. The world ended in that sound. There is a tape recorder beside me. I didn't put it there. I pressed play. It was my voice, speaking words I do not remember saying. They came from the bell. Not after it rang. Before. It calls them in reverse. It rewinds time. Every ring brings them closer to the first sound. The one that never stopped. The one that began the hollow. Then laughter. Not mine. High, choked, rattling laughter. Like metal dragged across bone. Then silence. Then a whisper. Your name. This account will be buried, if I have the strength to send it. You might think reading this is safe, that the danger is only for those who hear the bell. But I thought that too. I thought words were just ink and memory. They aren't. This story is a map, and the bell sees whoever reads the map. It now knows your name. It knows your breath. And when dusk comes, even if you're far from Merriman's Hollow, you will hear the sound, and you will feel it, deep in your chest. Gone. The chapel is gone now, burned again, or perhaps never real to begin with. All that remains is a clearing where no birds sing and dusk falls too early. People pass by on distant trails and swear they hear a faint sound, something metallic, swinging in an abandoned wind. A bell with no tower, a toll with no end, and always, just before the sound fades, a whisper, "It's your turn."